Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Jason's Take On podcast series with myself, Jason Noble, here in a very dark and wet London, and my partner in crime, Mr. Whitehead. Say hello, Jason.
Hello, Jason.
We are really thrilled today that we've got it's our second podcast of the year and our second guest podcast. And today we have another amazing guest with us and a great conversation. We're going to talk all about the role of the CSM. What does the future of the customer success manager look like? And I think it's a really topical topic. There's lots of challenges we're seeing in the industry, lots of changes, and I'm sure it's one that a lot of our listeners are really going to be keen on this conversation. And I'd like to give a very, very, very big welcome to Maranda Dziekonski. Maranda, welcome. Maranda, until very recently, I think until yesterday, was the Chief Customer Officer at Swiftly. This has taken us about 10 different chances to get this reorganized, predominantly down to me, my fault of other things coming up, but I'm thrilled to bits that we've got Maranda here. Maranda spent a lot of time at Swiftly as their CCO, helping build their processes up. Swiftly, if you don't know, help us make cities more efficient. So it's a pretty big task that they're undertaking, but she's done some amazing work there, building out their customer success function, their customer success team there. And if you're not connected with her already, and I'll let her talk more about this, but she's departed and she's going to be joining the team at our work in the US as the new SVP of customer success, I think beginning of next month. So really excited about this. And Maranda, she's very well respected in the customer success community, a very well-known leader, extensive experience building teams, scaling teams in early startups, early to mid-stage startups. She's also been part of a number of companies that have seen a number of successful exits. So she's got a lot to bring to the table. She's also a repeat recipient of the much acclaimed top 25 and top 50 customer success influence awards. Huge achievements. Maranda, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here and to be actually doing this conversation at last.
I know, finally. I'm on the Jasons. I can't believe it. I've made it. I'm talking to the Jasons on the Jasons podcast.
And it's on that day you can sit back and relax a bit and enjoy the conversation, but
yeah, you know me. I love to chit chat, so this is going to be great.
Absolutely. Could you just start us off? I've given a little intro there, but in your own words, give us a quick intro to who you are, who Maranda is, and really your own journeys to where's got you to where you've got to, and kind of your upcoming role with our work.
Yeah, so I think you did a fantastic job introducing me. I don't know if I have a ton to add, but I did start out in customer success some 20-odd something years ago, working at a very large organization that had, 30,000 plus employees globally. We were $50 billion a year in revenue. I spent 9 years there learning how to do customer success. I managed some very large strategic portfolios, and that was in Michigan, and then made the journey to Silicon Valley and now have been part of 7 startups. Some have had successful exits. Some have exited in a different manner. Yeah, they've all exited one way or another. I've been really fortunate, though. I've landed at, Lending Club, which had a unicorn IPO, HelloSign, which had a successful acquisition by Dropbox. I had, Castlight Health. I was there shortly before their IPO. And then, of course, recently Swiftly, which had an acquisition by JMI Equity. So that's 4 equity events, I guess is what I could call it.
4 out of 7. That's a good hit rate.
Not bad. Yeah. Now I'm starting my 8th, which I'm really excited about. And I shared a lot about, why I chose this location. And I did talk to a total of 39 companies when I was going through this journey. And I spoke more seriously with 14, but I was very fortunate to be in a ton of conversations, to have an idea of what's out there, figure out what type of leader I want to work with, what kind of team, the mission. And definitely I chose, our work because the mission just really spoke to me as somebody who grew up with a blue collar family and poverty and, understanding needing to make ends meet, living paycheck to paycheck. I've been there. So this is the community I'm going to serve at our work. And I'm really excited.
I think that mission behind an organization, it's it's not a vision, it's a mission, and they're very different, aren't they? And I think that's something where you can see the fundamental difference it can make in not just in the city you live in the country, but in society. It's a huge thing. I think it's a great intro, that, and I think that experience from large organizations to 7 startups, 8 now, you've seen it all. You really have. You've seen the good, the bad, the ugly. How, in your time in customer success, I mean, how have you seen it change and grow? What are some, particularly when we look at the roles in it, and we'll get onto the role of the CSM, but how have you seen the industry and the roles change in it?
Well, I mean, now I think investors get it. Finally, I think in the last 5 years or so, I've started noticing that investors really get what, customer success is and the value that it can bring to an organization. That has not always been the case, which means that the leader of the customer success organization had to fight to sit, to have that seat at the table. That's no longer the case, I believe, and at least in most organizations that I've spoken with. The investors seem to understand that, whether it's a PE firm or a VC, they understand the power of having a very strong customer success motion. On the other end of the spectrum, I think we have done a pretty damn good job of moving customer success managers from that reactive support-like function and the management of the portfolio being the afterthought to having a strong motion of them managing the portfolio, proactively doing the account planning, thinking about what needs to be true in order for a renewal to happen, what needs to be true for them to expand with us. And I'm of course talking about the heavy B2B enterprise motion, but I think we really got that down. We have those playbooks. I will say that the new emerging thing that I don't think we quite have down is this tech touch, digital touch, one-to-many touch, whatever the hell you want to call it, touch. Yep. I don't think we have that down yet. I
like your last definition of that, the what the hell.
Yeah, I think that's the next thing that we've got to figure out as, leadership teams, yep. Or as a community, because there's a lot of power in it. Whether you are in B2B enterprise or you're in B2C or whatever you're in, you have got to figure out, how do you communicate to the masses? How do you leverage technology to make you more efficient, especially, given the economic downturn? We cannot continue to throw bodies at problems. So we're going to have to really figure out how to be more efficient. And I think that layer, that one-to-many or whatever the hell we call it, we've got to get that figured out quick because money is not going to be flowing freely like it used to.
Yeah, money and headcount are not. I like what you say about we've progressed in the 5 years and all that. I'm curious too, are there any areas where you think we've actually taken a few steps backwards? So it's like, the tech touch we haven't figured out yet. We've progressed in some other areas, but are there some things you say, wow, that was probably a mistake and we should have, or this could be a mistake right now as an industry?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I'm raising my eyebrow, like my right eyebrow at very frequently now is I'm seeing, because of the state of the economy, I think leadership is panicking, whether it's your board, it's your CEO, whomever it is. And I'm starting to see companies have like a power play and push some of that power back over into the sales realm. Because for one reason or another, maybe the CS leaders aren't comfortable with sales, or they haven't been given that opportunity or that training, or they don't have those chops. And I think that makes me a little nervous. I'm seeing it a lot, not just, in isolation, but the minute there's a panic, it's like, oh, let's get this into the revenue owning hands. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a common theme and thread that we see as well globally. It's different organizations kind of panicking about economic situations, what they need to do. Do you, in the organizations you've worked in, when you've seen the different CSMs there and you've built these functions, I love the way you said, you've seen that kind of growth from reactive to proactive, driving renewals and cross-sell. You do get a lot of CSMs still wearing multiple hats, doing too much, being still very reactive. And I think a lot of it can depend on, their level of experience, but also the company they're with. And a lot of companies have very different views as to what they should be doing. And often, even the customers, there's a different expectation. For you, if we look at kind of the ideal customer success manager in one of your organizations? What are the core elements that they're doing as part of their role?
Yeah, that's a really good question to call out. And it depends on the stage of the company. So I'll use Swiftly as an example. When I started at Swiftly, there was a handful of CSMs there, and they did everything from onboarding to support to the relationship management and renewals and all of that stuff. It was all owned by just a handful of people. Problem with that was, well, first of all, the company was small. I joined when we were just under 30 people and just not a ton of customers. So at that time, it made sense to have all of that owned by just a small group of individuals, because it just, business sense and also customer sense. The problem with that is it didn't scale, and it couldn't scale because you have to eventually start peeling back those layers of the onion and specializing in order to scale. So I see this happen again and again at these organizations. They need to really figure out, when do I specialize? Because if you do it too early, then you have a bunch of folks who have a ton of bandwidth on their hands and they're not busy. But if you do it too late, you sacrifice employee morale, team morale, the customer experience, and ultimately the business outcomes. So I think that the CSM that joins, that wants to do everything, is sometimes different than the CSM that evolves with you while you specialize. So I don't know if that answers your question.
I think it does. And I think that getting that balance right is so difficult, isn't it? And trying to time it so that it's right. Because you can't, like you say, you've got, what you don't want to do is having a team that are not doing anything, they're twiddling their thumbs, because that impacts morale as well, as much as having too much to do. And it is. And I think you've got to be very careful. You've got to look at the stage the business is at, what your priorities are, what your level of funding is, what your customers are. So there's all these other things. I think to your point earlier, when you look at the market as well, that brings in another dimension to it, the external economic situations.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, I think too, what you were saying, you need to specialize to scale, you need to automate to scale. And now everyone's, all that requires investment, and people are getting very scared about making investment, whether it's in tools or people or process or whatever it is. It's going to be a challenging few months, I think, for quite a few folks. One of the things I wanted to ask you is, since you've seen this evolution of CS over the years, I've maintained a theory that over time, CS will become more of a competitive differentiator to help companies win new sales. When you can point to, look at our track record of making our customers successful compared to our competitors. But I personally don't think we're quite there yet. But for that to actually be impactful, I think customers need to be more sophisticated in what they're buying, what they're looking for, and what they realize it takes. What sort of evolutions are you seeing in terms of the sophistication of customers when it comes to what they're expecting out of a customer success team, what they're demanding, and what they might see with their other vendors that they're saying, hey, you should be doing this for us?
That's a really good question. And, I just wrapped up my tenure with a company that served public transit. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I wouldn't call them, unsophisticated buyers. They know the problems that they're solving and they know what they need. However, it's also a government entity and it moves a little bit slower.
Yeah.
So in order to answer your question, I think it depends on your customer base and what problems they're solving with your services or your product, and how in tune they are with how those problems can be solved. I think where customer success can come in the sales cycle, or, as a differentiator, is when we start looping in things like maturity matrix, where we show the customer, this is a customer similar to you. This is how they've used our product to solve these particular product or problem statements. Are these problem statements that you encounter? Yes. Great. These are the things that you could do with our products and services to get you from A, B, and C. And those that are the most mature in using, the majority of the features are solving these types of problems, like really wrapping it into problem statements and showing how the customer success manager will partner with you to drive those outcomes. That's what we've done at Swiftly. And that is what has netted us our very strong outcomes for the customer and also for the company.
That's great. I like that approach. I haven't heard people do it in quite such a consistent fashion, especially early in the sales process.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's super early. When you have a long sales cycle, you're not going to bring that right in at the beginning and be like, look, no, it's more when, that it could definitely be a differentiator that you could leverage in the sales cycle. We always, customer success was listed as a differentiator. Like, you will get this team is going to help you, with your outcomes. They're going to do regular business reviews with you, make sure you're collecting the goals of what you want to achieve, partnering with you to achieve those goals. And then once you achieve those, we collect new goals and we do it again. Right.
Did you find it hard to get buy-in from the sales team to do that and be part of their process?
No, not at all. It's beneficial to them.
Yep.
If you can speak to the salesperson through their wallet, you show them how this is beneficial for, expansion, upsell opportunities, cross-sell opportunities, renewals, if they own renewals, then it's just like a no-brainer.
It isn't even if you bring it in at the right point, you're part of closing that initial deal as well. I think the way, I love the way you've kind of phrased it there. I mean, for me, it's you bring the CSM, the CS team into the sales process to really bring case studies to life. You can really showcase what customers are really doing. And it makes such a difference when it works.
I mean, case studies, references, all of those types of things are generally generated in customer success. So if we're doing our jobs correctly, we should have customers out there that are willing to advocate for us and our products.
Yeah. So, what do you see today as some of the biggest challenges for CSMs as the roles coming into it? And how do we go about addressing those issues?
Not being the dumping ground in the organization. I've seen this time and time again to where, I don't know if it's causation or correlation, but everybody kind of says, well, let's just, push this over to customer success or put this on customer success. And next thing you know, you have a CSM team that's doing 50 things, and then they can't do the things that they need to do right. Mm-hmm. Because you can't have that much on your plate and be able to really manage your portfolio. So if I was to say anything, I urge leaders out there to be guardians of your CSM's time. Understand where they're spending their time. Don't, of course, come across as somebody who doesn't want to partner with others in the organization, but understand if something's being punted over to your organization, why? What is the problem it's going to solve? Does it really belong there? Or does it belong within another function, maybe within the customer success organization and not with a CSM, right? Just really drill in on the whys before you're just like, yes, we'll take that. We'll take this. It's sometimes viewed as like a power play. The more you own, but I will urge folks to think about it in the opposite way. If you're not doing the core of what you need to do well, owning more means nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a tough balance to figure out, like what should be owned, what shouldn't be. And so many organizations I meet with, they really struggle to get that internal politics and balance and roles and responsibilities. And, if you're able to get that to work, I think you're really ahead of the game. Absolutely. So I'm sort of wondering, in your perspective, what does the future of a CSM look like, and how will it be different today? Where do you see us needing to pivot more going forward? And what's sort of your timeline for that? Is it like 5 or 10 years down the road, or is it like in the next 1 or 2 years down the road?
Oh, Jason, I work in early startups. I can't even think a year or two out. 5 years? What does that look like? I do think what I said earlier about the economic state, customer success managers, if they're not comfortable with owning renewals or expansions, upsells, things like that, they need to get comfortable with the commercials, or else, that function will go to sales. I'm really concerned that we're just going to start seeing, all of the commercials just completely put in this bucket with sales. And I think that CS just needs to get comfortable with this.
I love that. And it is, you've got to, because it's a commercial function. We should be a revenue generating function, a profit center part of the business.
Exactly.
It requires a mind shift, and it's part of that shifting from doing everything from doing support and things to how do we generate revenue for the business and how do we ultimately generate enterprise value for ourselves.
Exactly. 100%.
God, Jace, were you going to say something?
Yep, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Miranda, this is a really phenomenal conversation, and really appreciate you taking your time out. The timing, of all the rearranging it on the day that you leave. So apologies for the timing, but it's been a great conversation. I think there's so much that you bring to our listeners, your experiences. I think it's unique. It's what makes you who you are. But there's so much to add. What we always like to do is give our guests a bold challenge question. And the one for you is, what would you say is the number one thing as a CSM that I should be doing? If I'm a CSM, what's the number one thing I should be working on today to ensure that I'm ready for the future?
Okay, so
It's a big question.
It is a really big question. I have noticed that a lot of customer success managers don't understand the business that they work in. So really understand, what is net retention? What does that mean? What is your levers to drive net retention? What is gross renewal? What is gross dollar renewal? What is gross dollar retention? Like, really know all of these things and understand how you impact that and how those you partner with impact that. Get a big picture of how these businesses work, not just your day to day. Look outside of the mechanics of I do ABC to, how you impact everything, the full ecosystem.
That's awesome. Love that. Well, thank you again for being here. Before we go, we always like to invite a guest to do a shameless plug. So please let us know what's at top of mind for you, or how people can get in touch, or whatever you'd like to plug.
I don't have a lot to plug these days. I sunsetted my podcast, but I do talk a lot about customer success, leadership, hiring. So I was also a human resource professional. I was the chief people officer at Swiftly for 3 years. So feel free to follow me on LinkedIn. Very easy to find.
That's great. Awesome. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it, Miranda. Thanks,
Miranda. This has been great. And I know I'm looking forward to more of these conversations. There's some great content that you do push out for people to listen to. So do, like Miranda said, if you're not following her, make sure you do. She's a person to watch and listen to. Superb conversation. Thank you so much. And best of luck in your new role next month.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.